Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a strange video that I thought I would never make. It's called Hated Albums in My Music Collection. And I generally don't quote hate anything, but there are some albums I really detest that I have tried to get into. You give it your all and it just never clicks with you. And it's one of those ones that you look back on and you're just kind of like, I just don't even want that one in the collection. I just never go back to it. It doesn't, fit for me. And that's what these albums are. But I'm a completist, so they're still in the collection, and therefore I can actually make this video about hated albums in my music collection. So we're gonna dive into it here in just a bit. We'll get started, but before we do, of course, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do, because you're gonna stay up to date on really cool videos like this. If you leave a comment, all that stuff is great, and please subscribe. Those things help me out. And of course, as I said, you're gonna be just up to date on great things like this. So let's dive into it here. I'm going to do this alphabetical. Some of these you guys have seen or heard me talk about before, but grouping this here, I'm going to try to get into the stuff about why I really don't like these. And first one up, Glam Rock Chameleon, Alice Cooper, his 2000 era album, Brutal Planet. 14 studio albums produced by Bob Marlette. This guy has done great stuff and stuff not so much. But generally speaking, when that guy's on an album, I have found I don't like it. It's not him per se, but it's just maybe the style and direction that that guy was taking things at that time. Very dark, very heavy, almost an industrial tinge sound to it. Very, very metal and not the rock sound that we know Alice Cooper for. Now, here's the weird thing. The guitar players on this are Ryan Roxy, who did a bunch more stuff with him and came from the glam metal world and was a fantastic player. He's played with Slash. Then we got Phil X, who's in Bon Jovi right now. But this album does not have any of that flavor to it. And it's one of those ones that I tried at the time, and I listened to it, but it really sounds like Alice Cooper's trying too hard here to fit in with the new generation of metal bands that were coming out in the late 90s and very early 2000s. And so it just rubbed me the wrong way because it sounds forced. And it's not one of those ones I've warmed up to over the years. In fact, I've liked it even less going forward since then. But I don't know, man. I just can't do it anymore. But I'm a huge fan of Alice Cooper, so I got to keep it in the collection, right? All right. Next one up, glam metal icons, Dokken Shadow Life from 1997. Their sixth studio album. This was actually their second reunion album after Dysfunctional, which was not a great album in my opinion already. That one there was just very kind of mundane, run of the mill. But this one here takes the cake. This is the band making their grunge album, trying to stay up with the times, and I don't know whose idea it was. I don't know if it was George Lynch, because he's always changing styles and doing stuff, or whether Dokken really wanted to go this way, or the label, or what. But all in all, this one here just didn't move me, and it's one of those ones that's like, I can listen to it in very small doses. The occasional song on here, I'll kind of go, okay, but it's boring. And it just, there was not a single song on here that stood out to me. And it's one of those ones I never go back to. And I just, I wish they didn't make it. There's other bands that stayed true to who they were and continue to make albums that sounded like who they were. AC/DC being one of those bands that never veered away. Overkill, I don't know. There's tons of them out there, but there's some bands that chased trends. And we're going to see a number of those in this run here. So next one up, Metal Queen, Doro, Pesh, Machine to Machine, her 1995 and fifth solo album. But of course she comes from Warlock, which did some amazing stuff. And her first few solo albums were fantastic. But she's one of those ones too that has also tried to chase trends over the years. Now she's finally settled in to just being a traditional heavy metal sounding artist. But man, through the 90s, she chased a lot of things from glam metal to industrial to a bunch of other stuff. So this one here had 7 producers on it. And I think that's one of the reasons this album fails so hard with that industrial sound. And it was heavily, heavily remixed. It just did not fit with anything else she was doing. I don't know why she made an entire album of it. Not quite sure why some artists will just completely change sounds, styles, everything that their fan bases love them for, and they just go do something completely different. And I'm not saying artists can't do that, but man, it's a real mind bender sometimes as to why that happens. And to this day, I cannot go back to that album. And I'll say that at the time, I gave these things a fair shot, man. I tried. I listened to them over and over and over. And I'll talk to you about a couple others as we get closer to it about how much I really did try. All right, moving on. We've got original Runaway, Lita Ford, Wicked Wonderland, her 2009 comeback album. It was her 7th solo album. First one since Black from 1995. But she too decided to go to a sort of a very heavy, almost industrial tinged sounding album. She made it with her husband, then husband, because they're now divorced, Jim Gillette from Nitro. And you'd think having the sound of Nitro and Lita Ford come together would have been awesome. But this album here, dark. It was just, I don't know, it was not good at all. And she had been away for a long time. She basically retired, decided to go have a bunch of kids, raise a family. Good for her. She was done. Then she says, you know what? I still want to rock. And she comes out and makes this thing. And it was sort of like, what market were you going for on this? So very, very surprising. She's kind of made the return very slowly, but she's made the return coming back to that more traditional 80s metal sound that she was. Love the album Dangerous Curves. That one there is just a really good hidden gem, if you will, from that era. All right. Next up, we got glam metal rockers. And yes, I'm always going to call this band a glam metal band, even though a lot of you guys don't. I don't care. Talking about Great White, Sail Away from 1994. 7th studio album. It was released on a brand new label. Probably had something to do with it not doing as well as it could have done. It's an acoustic album, and basically all of the blues swagger and, you know, the hard rock sound is gone. The blues swagger seems to be gone. It's a bunch of ballads really on here. They could have done rock songs in an acoustic style, and they would have been awesome. Because following the Unplugged, yeah, they actually did MTV Unplugged, which was really well accepted. I kind of forget when that was. If it was like 93 or I don't know. But it was a later on, and it was kind of when the band should not have been doing well, and yet they were. So they go make an acoustic album because that's very popular with all the MTV Unplugged albums coming out. But this one just was lackluster. It was mundane. The opening overture on here that was only 38 seconds, I actually thought was the most interesting thing on here. But they, like I said, they had a couple songs, but most of what was on here just didn't do it for me. And I even asked the band when I met them at one point why they chose to make it. And they just said that's where their mind was at. But I really got no answer in terms of the direction, the musical change, not only acoustically, but just kind of like I said, where did all that swagger go? And why do we not have any rocking acoustic songs like ones that they had done on previous albums? So that's just one of those ones that I pull out from time to time and I try it and I don't like it and I just, it pains me sometimes. Okay, but this next one here, I think probably takes the cake on albums that pain me. I don't even want to see them in the collection. Sleaze Metal Icons, LA Guns, renamed The LA Guns. And it's called American Hardcore, 1996, 5th studio album. Only Tracy Guns and Steve Riley are left from the original lineup. We got a couple new guys in here, including new lead vocalist Chris Van Dahl, who comes from Cherry Street. And if you don't know that band, they were a killer, kind of unsung hero of the glam metal scene that never really made it, that had a few albums come out on very, very small independent labels. So this guy totally sings in the style like Phil Lewis. He could totally pull it off. And yet they made a hardcore album. I mean, it's not even hard rock, it's hardcore. It's just guttural. I don't know. I don't like the vocals on it. It's Tracy Gunn's solo album, Killing Machine, but under the name LA Guns, basically. And it's just one of those ones. Another one, and I did not put it in here, but The Lynch Mob and Smoke This. Oh, God, that's an awful one. All right, we got the next one here. Some of these are just really bringing me down, which is why I never wanted to make one of these. I don't like talking crap about bands. I love bands and I love music and I want to be positive and I want to enjoy it. And I don't enjoy these. All right, got another glam metal one for you. but these guys are legends. Motley Crue, Generation Swine. Yes, it's upside down. It is actually supposed to be that way. They turned it around later. It's sort of like Aerosmith, done with mirrors. Everything was upside down, but look at the spine. Okay, seventh studio album from 1997. It was a reunion album. They were supposed to be coming back bigger than ever. And up front, they performed on, I want to say, the American Music Awards, and they did their new version of Shout at the Devil. And that was rocked up and modernized, and I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And when we got an album full of that, that would have been great. The only thing on here that ended up doing well and kind of being okay was the song Afraid, which still had some of that, I don't know, pop-esque sounding stuff. It was a little bit melodic at moments, and it had catchy refrain on it. But God, some of the other stuff on here was just ear-splitting nonsense. Find myself with all the kids screaming over it, and Afraid and Flush, I liked Afraid. Flush that was on here, and Generation Swine was kind of all right. Again, it's that punky sort of Anarchy in the UK style, Sex Pistols, we're gonna do it. We're a punk band, we don't care. Nikki Sixx took that too far, in my opinion, on a number of these albums. And this was one of them, but I know the reality of this was they were all walking on eggshells. It was a reunion. Everyone came back and nobody wanted to say no to the other person. And everyone wanted to just say yes and do it right and get it out there. And the problem is, with too many people, no one's standing up saying something is crap, we get Generation Swine. The worst, absolutely the worst aspect of this album was, instead of having Vince sing everything, Tommy Lee sings and Nikki Sixx sings. All right, the Nikki Sixx song Rocket Ship on here, I can kind of get behind, but Tommy Lee singing about his newborn baby son named Brandon just comes off awful. And I don't know, maybe call it, a song about my son, but I don't know, hearing him say the name Brandon over and over, it just, I don't know, it killed it for me. It didn't work for me at all. Maybe some of you guys found it to be a really sweet love song to his kid, but it just turned me off. And this album, I can't do it. I pulled this out recently because Motley Crue just released their canceled EP, which that's got its own problems with it. That's a whole other thing. But I did dig it, and it was new material, and I was enjoying it, and I wanted to pull out some stuff, and I pulled out some of their killer stuff. I talked about some of the unsung, well, not in some of my other videos, I mean. New Tattoo, I think, is an unsung hero. It's one of my favorites of theirs, even though a lot of people don't like it. And I was jamming out to that stuff. I tried to give this another go. And it's just one of those ones that as the years pass, I can't do it. But at the time, man, I bought it on cassette for the car. I had it on CD. I played it incessantly because it was new Motley Crue. But after the light of day shone down on this album and the years have passed, I just can't do it. I question why they did what they did. All those drum loops and samples and backbeats, and they tried to modernize. I mean, I totally get it, but it was just the absolute wrong thing to do. The album that followed it, New Tattoo, should have been the album that they made in place of this. I think it would have returned the band to the top. Not so much the charts, but just in terms of people's eyes. If they had come back after the 1994 album that had John Corabi, which was an awesome album in my opinion, the heaviness that the band did and the new direction, I think, worked perfect in 1994. It was John Corabi. People couldn't get behind that. But if Motley Crue had come back with New Tattoo, I think we'd be singing an entirely different story about the band. But they've made a lot of missteps, especially since Saints of Los Angeles going forward. It's just like, what are they thinking? All right, moving on. Okay, I'm going to have to pull out some classic albums after this video just to reset my brain, I think. All right, this one here, not such a horrific album, but questionable in my opinion. AOR melodic rock duo, Nelson, Because They Can, 1995, released as their second album, but actually it was their third album. They had recorded a fantastic second album called Imaginator. It was shelved in 1992 and later got released in 1996. So you can go check that out and listen to that. If you're a glam metal fanatic and you love the debut, that album is an amazing album. And had it come out in 1992, there was a lot of glam metal bands still releasing things in 1992 that did well. Firehouse still did well. The Damn Yankees still did well. A lot of bands, Def Leppard putting out Adrenalize. There was a lot of that stuff. I think they could have still been successful and probably had a top 10 ballad hit, but it didn't happen. They put this thing out. They wait till 1995 after all the grunge is done. And then they put Dogs with Blonde Hair, which really turned me off. I have to admit, and I apologize to any dog lovers out there. I am not a dog fan. I don't know why. It doesn't work for me. I am a cat person. So this just also turned me off, but it was also just poking fun at them. And I know that was part of what they were trying to do. They were saying, everybody thinks we're pretty boys, so we're going to put dogs, with our wigs, on it. I don't know. The whole thing, it was just cheesed up. And I get it. It was 1995. Basically, what they tried to do is they took everything that was great about the debut that people loved and they just overdid it. It was overly acoustic, it was overly ballad-esque, it was overly pop sensible, and it just took all of the, I don't know, the little bit of edge that they did have, the little bit of rock that they did have, and it was gone. I couldn't do it. I can't do it. I still go back to Imaginator and just wonder what if they had put that out in place of this album. So these are albums, unfortunately, that sit in my collection that collect dust, that get pulled out when I've listened to everything else, and I do try to give them a good listen. And there's usually one song on there somewhere that I'll go, oh yeah, okay, that's great, but it's just buried too much in there. So here's one that I loved at the time for what it was. I loved it at the time for what it was, just new music from this great band, but I just can't go back to it. Scorpions, Eye to Eye from 1999, their 14th studio album at the time. It was the first one to feature new drummer James Kotak. It's tucked away right there in the back. It was the second one on Atlantic Records, so they had the big label. Promotion was behind this thing. But the style is much more pop metal. They did put samples in it and drum loops and some backbeats and stuff like that. And some of the stuff is okay. I can kind of get behind it. But the second song on here, To Be With You, has a cheesy Casio sounding keyboard. And if you guys know what I'm talking about, getting those Casio keyboards for Christmas that we all got one year, just kills it. It was just awful. And I don't know why they did it. It was a single. It was the first single. It's hokey. It's just cheese. Badness. God. Oh, I cringe at it. I have to say the rest of the album is not so bad, but it's just 90s modern era metal sounding with some pop influences in here. 10 Light Years Away was okay. Mind Like a Tree was kind of okay. What You Give to Get Back, those were ballads that were released. The songs, I think it was 10 Light Years Away, but What You Give to Get Back certainly was, I remember. I don't know. It's one of those ones that I think if I could have at least taken out To Be With You, I probably could get past it, but that one makes me cringe to this day. I can't even get past it. I kind of accepted it for what it was when this came out in 1999. And remember, back in the late 90s, there was a lot of these bands were broken up and gone, and my heroes weren't doing it. They weren't, in the public eye. And when the occasional band from the late 80s came back and dropped something like Dokken and Scorpions, Motley Crue, I jumped on those things, but God, looking back at some of this stuff, it's just awful. All right. Thrash metal titans, one of the big four. Slayer, Undisputed Attitude, 1996, 7th studio album, and predominantly a covers album. Now, the interesting thing is this. It was a punk covers album, a hardcore album. And I kind of get why that's all influences to Slayer, but for every song to be that on here did not float my boat, especially after their 1994 album Divine Intervention, which was a fantastic, amazing metal album. I think it was 1994. And I know this was kind of just a little tide me over. Everybody was making cover albums and stuff like that. We do have two songs that Jeff Hanneman wrote back in his hardcore days called Can't Stand You and Drunk Drivers Against Mad Mothers, recorded by Pat Smear. There was one new Slayer song. It's the last song on here, 14th track, Gemini, which was fantastic. Didn't sound anything like the rest of this. God, at least start the album with that. I don't know. I did enjoy it for what it was at the time, but I do remember at the time getting it and just saying, it doesn't sound like Slayer. It's not what I love about Slayer. And I did listen to it incessantly. I did give it a shot. It's an album I never go back to. I never pull it out. It sits in the collection to complete it to this day. Yeah, man, I'm so dejected by some of these things. All right, moving on to a major progressive metal band, Queensryche, and their album American Soldier from 2009, 11 studio album. This was a concept album about the lives and experiences of those in the armed forces. And I've got nothing against any of that. I've got nothing against soldiers. I've got nothing against the storyline behind it. But it's so mundane. The stuff that was in here, I'm not talking about so much lyrically, musically, it's very mundane. And some of the stuff that was in here was a lot of narration and stuff, and it kills the music. There wasn't anything in here that came out that drove the album with the power and stuff that we knew Queensryche for. There's nothing on here that sounds like Operation Mindcrime, Empire. And I get it, we don't have the guitar player that wrote those things in here. Chris DeGarmo's not part of this. It was all being led by Jeff Tate. But it's just one of those ones that at the time, I tried it, nothing moved me on it. It's just slow, it's dour, and I get it. The storyline of it is very much so, because they're dealing with a lot of problems and things that the soldiers have to deal with when they come back. Maybe he felt he couldn't have an upbeat song on here because of that. But I don't know, man, it kills the album. And again, I'm going to say that most of this, of what I'm talking about, is not the lyrical aspect. It's how it was presented. It's the musical aspect of it. And I have tried this album. I have wanted to love this album so many times, but I can't. And it goes just as much for this next one here, and why I'm wearing this shirt, if you can't tell what that is. Warrant Cherry Pie. I love this shirt, such a killer shirt. If you like it, check out Societies, I'm not even going to be able to spell it right, but the T part is T-E-E on it. The Societies. Great shirts. Anyways, I love this one. And I'm wearing it for this band because I love this band, but I just cannot, absolutely cannot do this album. Warrant, Belly to Belly from 1996, their 5th studio album. Still had 3 original members, man. It should have done well. We had Janie Lane, and it was the last album of all original material that he would be part of. He wrote most of their songs. Again, it should have been amazing. We still had guitarist Eric Turner. We had the bassist Jerry Dixon. Those 2 guys wrote a lot of stuff together. But the style of this is darker, it's slower, it's dirgier. It's their grunge album. Even though it's 1996, they missed the boat doing this. The album right before this, Ultraphobic, was still very good, yet darker and heavier and down-tuned and stuff, moving with the times, but keeping what made Warrant great. And they just, I swear, lost it all. You don't even put the song titles on the back. It just pisses me off to no end. I open this up, I don't have song titles. So it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you promoting with this? Nothing about this. And why are you calling yourselves Warrant 1996? Why is this just not Warrant, right? Why did LA Guns have to go with the LA Guns or the Lynch Mob? They never had the in front of it. So I don't know, a lot of this stuff, everything about this, they changed the logo, they changed the name, there's no song titles. I was turned off from the get-go, but then you listen to the music, and this was another one. I loved these bands. These bands put out new albums. I wasn't into other stuff, so I'm giving this stuff a try. And it was such a dark time in the 90s, man, because all my bands were making these crappy albums that I wanted to love. And I do love grunge, so don't get me wrong. I love alternative rock. I loved the grunge era and those bands doing it. But when my favorite bands from the glam metal and heavy metal era were doing that sort of stuff, it always felt forced to me. I knew it was, their hearts weren't in it. So very few bands that were able to make that transition to that heavier sound, and these albums didn't do it. And so those are 12 hated albums in my music collection that I absolutely detest. I don't pull them out very, if ever, often. I don't know. See what you think about these albums here. Let me know your thoughts about what hated album you have in your musical collection. I don't want to hear about a hated band that you don't own anything from, okay? Don't tell me about that, because you don't know anything about that. You don't even own it, right? So let's not talk about bands we hate. Let's just talk about an album, a particular album from a band we love that we hate, we detest, we despise. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and have fun with the video. All right, bye, guys.